Good afternoon and welcome back to Mortgage Financing and Home Buyer Ready. I am so glad you came to join us again today. We have an exciting show for you today. But first, I'm Barbara Grant Proctor and I'm with Cardinal Financial. And as you can see, I'm sitting here by myself today. My co host, Jackie Abrams, was not feeling well today. She's with Sampson Properties, but she told me, Barbara, the show must go on. So that's what I'm doing today. The show must go on. So, Jackie, you get well soon. I'm going to try to do right by you today. I know she's sitting back laughing at me. But anyway, thank you for coming today. Let's do some homework first. If you'd like to be a studio audience, you can always email Jackie and I at homebuyeraudience@gmail.com. And if you have any questions for us, you can always email us homebuyerquestions@gmail.com. And that way we can always get back to you. So just stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hello, my name is Tania McQueen. I'm the Residential Services Manager for Prestige Community Resources.
What our new facilities are respite centers. We're opening 2 in the city right now. Hopefully we'll expand to more. But respite centers are a place where people can come and get a little additional support with their mental health. Our one on Eastern Avenue is for men, and our one on Minnesota Avenue is for women. Our facilities are for all DC residents, especially focusing in on those in Ward 7 and 8. So they're really nice, and I'm excited for consumers to actually see them. What are the services that we're going to provide? Therapy, case management, medication management, all provided by professional staff, a licensed nurse practitioner, psychiatrists, sociologists, social workers, and then our paraprofessionals, our case managers. It's just a place where you can come and get the supports that you need to work on your personal goals, as well as to get your mental health straight. Simple, single adult, 18 years of age or older, a DC resident. You need to have insurance, but if you don't have it, it's okay. Still come, we'll work on getting you insurance. Have to have a negative COVID test, a negative TB test, and be willing to work on your mental health. For more information about respite services, you can contact us at 202-796-5000 or hit us up on our website at www.prestigecommunityresources.org.
Welcome back to Mortgage Financing and Home Buyer Ready. Like I said, we have another wonderful show for you this week. Last time we were here, in keeping with the theme of things, we're on insurance. So last time we talked about title insurance and the closing and how that works, and we had a great show. This week it's going to be just as exciting. So today, I'm going to get ready to introduce our guest to you. We're going to talk about mortgage insurance. And I know a lot of people, when they talk about mortgage insurance, they're probably thinking MI, PI, principal mortgage insurance. But we're going to talk about something better today. We're going to talk about mortgage protection insurance. And I have our guest here with us today, Marcy Miles Clark. It is so wonderful to get you in the house. You know I know her already, right? So it is awesome to get you in the house today. So please tell us what you are doing and how we can help the people.
Yes, Barb, thanks. It's so great to be here. So, like Barb said, Marcy Miles Clark. My company is actually called Cover Your Assets Insurance.com or ins.com. And what we do is, we help people, just like you said. There's a number of different insurances out there for mortgage. Like you said, there's MI, there's PMI, there's HOA, and those all cover the lender, Barb.
Right.
But the purpose of the insurance that I actually represent is actually to cover the beneficiary, the homeowner. And so that's how this can help,
That's
you
good
know.
stuff. That's
Yeah.
good stuff because people don't know that there's other insurance out there other than insurance that you have to get
That's
when
right.
you're getting a mortgage.
That's right.
But something to protect you. And I know with after the past 2 years, Marcy, this would have came in handy. You know
Yes.
what I'm saying?
Yes.
So yes.
Absolutely. So I've been doing this now for well over 10 years. It's hard to believe that it's been that long.
Wow.
And I'm actually a licensed realtor as well as a life and health insurance consultant, as you know. So combined, about 20 years of the two.
Wow. That's longevity.
Yes, and so I'm very passionate about this subject. It's right up my alley, and prior to the pandemic, it was there was interest in insurance, but the pandemic just opened up doors and really just took it up a few notches,
Right.
because people lost their homes, they lost their jobs, and unfortunately a loss of life.
Yes.
And those kind of things actually promote, major interests, unfortunately, in insurance, like never before. And so, we saw just an influx of like GoFundMe's and, just a lot of people who were just not prepared.
Absolutely.
And, I also have, a personal testimony, which we'll talk about at some point, but
Of course, I do definitely want you to share that.
yes. There were definitely some things, that transpired personally in my family, which, allowed for us to be able to appreciate, the benefits that insurance offers, just insurance as a
Absolutely.
whole, not necessarily as it relates to the mortgage protection insurance, but the bottom line is our motto as a company is proactive protection for peace of mind.
Peace of mind.
And that's really what it's all about, Barb. It's really
Absolutely.
about, just planning ahead. We say pray, plan, prosper.
Love it. Pray, plan,
Plan,
prosper.
prosper.
Love it.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes, I love that as well. Because if we do all those three things, then, we should definitely be setting ourselves up for major success.
Absolutely.
You
So,
know.
what I want you to do, tell me or tell the audience,
Sure.
what is mortgage insurance protection?
Yes. So mortgage protection insurance is actually term life insurance, and it is actually designed to protect the life of the homeowner. And that way, if someone were to pass, then they would be able to leave coverage for their
Wow.
family. And what we find, especially in the African American community, sometimes you need two incomes to be able to cover that
Yes.
mortgage, right?
Absolutely.
As a
Absolutely.
loan officer, I'm preaching to the choir.
Yes.
And so, what happens if one of the spouses or, the two or partners, what happens if you lose one of the incomes? If they die or if there's a disability or something, then we find ourselves sometimes in a pickle and we're unable to, be able to carry the
Hang on
mortgage.
to the home. That's true.
Right?
That's true.
And so the last thing that we need is to have, a death or, a loss of job and then turn around and lose our home, And so this mortgage insurance protection is actually one of the ways that we can buffer ourselves, to be able to keep ourselves from,
Absolutely.
falling when we have those kind of situations, kind of gives us a cushion because we know we have something to fall back on.
That is awesome. So the mortgage insurance it's a protection outside of your mortgage.
Yes.
That in case, because we know there's all different types of insurance. If someone
Right.
passes, they
Right.
have insurance.
Right.
But this is specifically for the mortgage. You hear that? This is
Right.
specifically for your mortgage. So you
Yes.
can have this
Yes.
besides having the other insurance, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that's like a big cushion. So
Yes.
you have the other insurance to take care of life and maybe
Right.
bills and things you have.
Right.
But if there's not enough
Right.
to cover the mortgage, then virtually something happens, the mortgage insurance that you're referring to would kick in. And does it cover, tell us how it works.
Yes.
Is it going to cover payments? Could it cover the cost of the home? Tell us how it works.
Yeah, so it could be all of the above. So essentially, it is a life insurance policy.
Okay.
It can be a term insurance policy designed, with the beneficiary in mind. And so what happens is it's actually set up so that if someone were to pass, then their beneficiary would be able to pay off the home.
Wow.
And so these policies can
Wow.
go up, as high as
Wow.
500,000. There's a number of different options. Insurance carriers have gotten really, really creative now with some of the different benefits that they actually put into these policies. So some of them come with like disability riders.
Oh.
So critical illness, like that function kind of like long-term care type policies. There's a lot of different, things that can actually be mixed into these policies that make it like dual coverage. But yeah,
I'm learning a lot right here just listening to
Yeah.
you, because I always thought that mortgage insurance is what it is. Okay, you get the mortgage insurance.
Yes.
You know, something happened, somebody had to pass. And then the mortgage insurance would kick in and either, I don't know, pay the monthly payments for so many years, or just go ahead and just pay the mortgage off, because I always thought of regular insurance would take
Yeah.
care of all the other things. But this is really good. So
Yeah.
you're telling me disability?
Yeah, it can have a disability component. Yes, there are a number of different things. It's flexible. And the good thing is that
Wow.
my clients actually sit down and do a consultation. That's how we start. Just to kind of find out exactly, what their expenses are, just, to
Very
match
good.
up
Yes.
the benefits with the
Yes.
need.
Yes.
And then we will design a policy with those benefits in mind based on what they tell me that they need. And so, it's not just if somebody dies, it covers that as well, of course. But like I said, it can also function as, a living policy, like have what we call living benefits as well. So it can be multi-purpose.
Wow, I'm excited. Look, I'm excited about it. I know you guys are excited about it, because I don't think there's a lot of talk around it. And I know that even when I close on a mortgage, I never have the conversation, and I don't
Right.
think Jackie does either as a
Right.
realtor.
Right.
But you're a realtor as well.
Right,
So you can have that conversation
Right, right.
with your clients and kind of incorporate everything together. But
Right.
I never had that type of conversation. Like,
Right.
maybe you want to get mortgage insurance outside of mortgage insurance, because the mortgage insurance, conventional, and the FHA, PMI insurance, that's really
Covers the
protecting
lender.
somebody else.
Yes.
You heard that?
Covers
It's
the lender.
protecting somebody else, the
Right.
lender. It's not protecting you.
Right.
Is if you default,
Right.
the lender's going to get paid.
That's right.
You're
So
not, but the lender is, right?
Right. The lender has CY aid, right? They've covered theirs, right? And so this mortgage insurance protection that we're talking about actually helps you to CYA.
The
right?
CYA.
Right.
And
wanna
you already
make
know what
sure-
CYA is.
Right. You already know. If you didn't know.
Cover your asset, right?
That's
Cover
right.
your asset.
Cover your asset, which is, and your home and your lives are your biggest assets.
That's
right.
right. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, this is really, really exciting.
Right.
So what I want to get into is, can we dig a little bit into, the policy, the protection of the policy? Like, let's break it down, because I know there's probably
Yes.
term.
Yes.
Is there whole life with that too?
Yes.
So you want to maybe we
Yeah.
can break that down a little
Yeah,
bit.
so there's typically the mortgage insurance policies, like we said, are typically term policies. So they're usually for a designated time because, again, they're meant to cover the mortgage. However, there are different designs, and there's also whole life insurance policies as well. And like I said, insurance coverage now is not like it used to be. It's it's not your mama's insurance,
Right,
right?
right.
Where the man comes to the house and picks up the premium, somebody dies, you get $10,000, right? So first of all,
Covers nothing.
Right, covers nothing, right? So first of all, not only do you have the ability to get significantly more money if and when someone passes, but there's a couple different components. They are easier to qualify for now.
Okay.
And so, you don't have to necessarily go through like the physicals and that kind of thing, right? So they're usually we have some that have like a guarantee component to it. Some of them just, you basically just kind of just answer questions, and and we look at the insurance companies kind of look at your like prescription background,
Okay.
basically for underwriting. But they're relatively simple to get, and you can get these coverages like up to $500,000 on the term side. Of course, whole life, you can get millions of dollars, but they're easier to obtain. The face amounts, which are the death benefits,
Right.
are, a lot higher now. And like I said, and you have, a lot more benefits to choose from, the benefits designs. I can't stress enough, just how much you can really tailor that personally, to your needs.
To your needs.
And so,
right.
and again, like I said, not your mom and not your grandmother's insurance policy, because again, those policies were designed in many cases, to just have enough to bury the person. So
Right.
burial insurance, that's something totally different. We'll talk about that as well. That's final expense burial
right.
policies. There's a number of different ways that you can cover your assets, but right now we're talking about the mortgage insurance, mortgage protection insurance specifically. But, it not only does it have all the other benefits that we talked about, but, people also, you don't have to wait till you die to be able to use them. Like I said, we have the living benefits with the critical illness riders
so important.
and disability. And if you think about, what we talked about the pandemic and how many people, lost their lives. And, again, I can speak from a personal standpoint. My husband was out of work for 6 months, because of COVID, and unfortunately we just celebrated as a country, 1 million lives lost. So that was potentially 1 million homeowners that somebody may have, been stuck with the other part of the mortgage, right? Could have benefited from these type of things. Yes. So the moral of the story, Barb, is just that the time is now. There's no time better than now, to really, really protect yourself proactively and cover your assets. I just can't say it enough.
I just love it, and I know you just hit on your story just a little bit, but your story has been so touching with you and your husband, and I'm just gonna say real quick, okay? So her husband did get COVID and was in the hospital, right? And this was at the beginning.
It was at the beginning, and that's what made it so significant because we both were impacted by COVID. Both of us were affected. We still don't know to this day where we got it. But I had a mild case. My husband went on to be severely ill. He was fighting for his life. He was on a ventilator for 30 days. They didn't expect him to live. He ended up in the hospital for almost 2 months total. And that 30 days that he was on a ventilator, he was in a medically induced coma. And, because you were part of our prayer warriors, we all came together and we literally prayed him back to life.
My goodness. And when you say prayed back to life, literally. Yes, I mean, prayer calls every day.
Yes.
And then I remember coming, we celebrated his birthday. I mean, that was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
But again, we're saying situations like that can happen and you just don't know. But if you know that you have some type of protection because you're the wife, you're out here, not knowing what's going to happen, not only with your husband, but also financially, what's going to happen with me. But having those type of things in place, that's just a burden that you don't have to worry about.
It makes all the difference. And I'm here to tell you. And, I did insurance. I've been helping people, like I said, with insurance over 10, 15 years. But Barb, I'm telling you, when the pandemic hit, this really, really just took it up a couple notches for me because of the need. And then also became a passion of mine because there were the insurances that we had in place that really made a difference and the outcome and our outcome.
Absolutely.
Fortunately, we didn't have to use our life insurances, but thank God that, we had the...
praying wife.
Yes. Thank God we had that long-term care coverage that my husband fought me on. He didn't even want to get when we first got married a few years back. Yeah, definitely.
Just go get it.
Exactly. Just get it. And I can't tell you how many of my friends I've actually told that the husbands are dragging their feet. I'm like, girl, just get it. This is before COVID. Now, I'll help you get it.
Right. And I guess now you probably have a lot of people coming to you saying, you know what, because we're still really not out of the woods. And we are really still... We don't know what's going to happen next. If something's going to happen next. But the whole bottom line is now we have the opportunity to prepare.
Yes.
Because, no one thought something like that would happen.
Exactly.
And so now we have the opportunity to prepare for a lot of things. And that's why, we have Marcy on here today to talk about this mortgage protection insurance, because if you do not have it, that is something that you can get. And so we want to make sure we give all her information later on the show. We got so much more we're going to talk about, but it's just amazing to your story with what happened and how you and your husband came through with all of this, and then the protections that you have, and then you took what happened to you, you turned it into a passion, and now I'm helping others, and now you're helping others, and that's what it's all about.
That's what it's about.
That's what it's all about. That's what Jackie and I try to do. That's what Marcy's trying to do. That's what everybody, when we have guests on here, the guests that we circle ourselves around is because they have the same type of passions that we do.
Right.
They want to help and they want to do and make sure that everybody's in the correct position
Yes.
with what is going on.
right.
So anybody you see that we bring on this show, you know, everybody, they've had a story, they know what's going on, they have a passion, and they want to help who? You. Right?
Absolutely.
And because this show is about home buying, mortgage financing, this is what we're going to continue to talk about.
Right.
So Marcy and I, we have a lot more to discuss, but we're going to take another commercial break, and then we're going to be right back with some more information for you. Stay tuned.
It is key that you mind your mental health.
Hey guys, how's everyone doing this week?
Hi.
Use the 5 keys to mental movement.
It's been a really monumental week for me. I realized that I was not being myself.
Reaching out.
Be positive attitude person self, like you guys know me to be. I was
Staying
listening to
upbeat.
teaching and get back to that happy, cheery self of me.
This week's been kind of
Being
stressful,
creative.
all of the workload that we have on online learning. So I've been trying to use different platforms and different websites to help ease my mind and ease my stress.
And what about you, Margaret?
Well, you guys know me. I just love to work with others and serve them.
Serving others.
Realize that when I serve others, my mind is off of myself.
That's right. And don't forget, self-care is key.
Self-care.
All right. So see you guys next week.
Right.
Bye.
Your mind matters.
And welcome back to Mortgage Financing and Being Home Buyer Ready. Again, we have our guest here, Marcy Miles Clark. Thank you for coming today. And Marcy is talking about mortgage insurance protection or mortgage protection insurance. I keep getting that wrong. It's mortgage protection insurance, but it is protection for your mortgage or protection for you. Am I saying that right? It's protection for you.
It's protection for you. Yes, first
For
and
your
foremost.
mortgage.
Right, for you to be able to pay off your mortgage.
For you to be pay off your
Your
mortgage.
mortgage.
So let's talk a little bit. I want to dig a little bit deep into. Let's talk about the term life insurance policy. I'd like to dig into maybe an example of a couple of things a family could put together. Let me give you a scenario. Let's say we have a husband and a wife, and the husband. We won't use the husband this time. Okay, we'll use the wife this time. We're not always going to use the man. Okay, and the 2 breadwinners, right? Have a home, 2 cars, kids in private school, football practice, piano lessons, braces. Let's talk about all of that, right?
Yep.
Is that your family? It could be your family. So when you sit down with that type of family, they have a home,
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
And you want to talk about mortgage protection insurance,
Yes.
not knowing that later on that the wife may get ill.
Right.
Okay, so let's
Right.
talk a little bit about that, how you would handle that.
Yeah, and it's really real because what you just said was actually a personal. Like that's something that has happened in my family. Again, this whole thing just really just brings my life, full circle.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I've seen young people get sick. My mom had a stroke at 32 years old, life changing. My sister passed from cancer at 37 years old.
Wow, Marcy.
And what happened? So, she was a realtor, which is really interesting in itself. Life coming full
Yes,
circle, right?
yes.
And, she had young kids, had a husband, they had a house, all the things, that you just talked about. She ended up being sick, ended up leaving the house to him. So that's a real world scenario that can really happen. In that scenario, though, of course, nobody forecasted that. You didn't know. She didn't know when she bought her house that
Absolutely.
5-10 years later, she was going to become deathly ill and end up succumbing, unfortunately, to breast cancer, which again is something I know is really near and
Right.
dear to your heart as well. But what we do is we set up people for those type of scenarios. That's the whole thing that insurance is for.
Absolutely.
If you just take it, we could just talk about car insurance, right? We have to have car insurance, and why? We pray that we never need it, right?
Absolutely.
But we are so hallelujah happy
when you're
if
in that
you need it,
accident,
right?
absolutely,
that you have it.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
so it's no different. There's no different at all when it comes to our life insurances, right? And so as it relates to like the mortgage insurance, you know, in that particular scenario, the first thing we want to do is we want to find out, of course, like how much, you know, the income, what's the income, right? Of both spouses, the expenses. And of course, we want to find out the mortgage payoff, which is
Right.
solely in your wheelhouse,
Yes,
right? So we
yes.
want to know what the mortgage balance is.
Okay.
And so, because again, remember the mortgage insurance, the whole purpose of the mortgage insurance policy is mortgage insurance protection is life insurance that actually will cover your family in event of a death. And so, you know, we actually set it up so that it mimics the time as well as the amount, you know, of balance that you have. So if you have a 15-year mortgage, if you have 15
Right.
years left on your mortgage and you have $250,000, then you may want to have like a 15-year term policy
Okay.
with maybe, you know, $300,000 of coverage, which will allow an event of a death for your mortgage to be paid off, and then have a little extra money left over for whatever, any household expenses.
So I just heard something. I heard something else.
Light bulb?
Light bulb, light bulb. Okay, so just like any other insurance, you owe $250 on your mortgage, but you set up a $300,000 policy. You get the $50,000.
Absolutely. So,
What?
so, okay.
What?
So,
Wait a minute. Okay, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so let me make this clear. There's a couple different types of policies out there, mortgage insurance protection. Okay, there's one that you might get when you from your lender. Okay, and again, they have themselves in mind.
Yes.
Okay, so if you get a solicitation from your lender, you have to read the fine print because they're most likely going to make themselves the beneficiary.
Oh, what?
Right? Yes, exactly. Because they want to make sure, again, CYA, they're going to see why they're A, right?
But they
want-
already got the MI, the PMI. Oh, but we're talking about a death. I don't
Right.
want to get it confused.
Right, exactly. So again, they want to make sure that
And we
if
get
you
solicitations after
Yes.
you purchase a home.
Right.
We get those solicitations for mortgage insurance.
Right.
I
Now-
hope you guys are listening to this.
Right.
Okay.
So you got to read the fine print though, because there's different policies out there. So
Yes.
typically, the ones that come directly from your lender, or after you settle, you know, or actually before settlement, sometimes the lender, because it'll actually be a policy with the lender in mind.
Wow.
And a lot of times, it can be part of like an optional part of your closing package, right? But in either case, the key there is that you want to look for the lender as the beneficiary. In that particular case, then you would not get anything back, right? And so they're going to have themselves as the beneficiary. They're going to pay off the mortgage, and everything else is a wrap. The kind of insurance that I represent for my clients, you're in
blowing my
control.
mind right now, but go ahead.
You're in control, okay? You're in control. So you're the beneficiary. This is something totally separate from anything that is, you know, your lender is either mandating or suggesting.
You're in control.
Okay? Yes. And the key to how you know the difference is because the policy is going to be designed around you with your needs in mind. Someone like myself is going to sit down and have this conversation and want to know how much is your payoff, you know, the things we just talked about.
Yes.
And the key is they're going to ask you who's your beneficiary and how much coverage you want. So with the lender policies, they're going to pretty much dictate the terms. So that's what's really important, because sometimes people know theoretically about mortgage insurance because they may have been solicited pre-closing or something, you know,
Right.
by the lender.
Yes.
But they don't necessarily understand the difference. So now my job is to educate people and let them know there are different types of mortgage insurance policies out
Okay,
there, right?
okay.
But the one that I'm talking about and that I highly suggest, of course, any mortgage policy is better than no mortgage
No
policy,
policy.
right? But I'm suggesting that you actually get the kind where you can tailor and you become the beneficiary. You get to pick your own beneficiary, and that you're in control and you can design it to work the way you need it to work. So given the example that we talked about, in that particular case, you would take a look at your payoff, and then we would design, you know, the policy around your payoff and your needs.
Right,
You know, so
right.
that your wife, in this particular case, if we're talking about husband or wife, you know, would be, or your spouse would be the beneficiary, they would pay off the house, and then you could potentially have money left over. So you get to control that one.
And you designate your own
Beneficiary, yes.
But the other policies, when you get, and everybody, if anybody's watching that has purchased a house, I'm going to say from me, that I was the lender, and you've received solicitation. I don't know whether you received solicitation from Cardinal, because I don't know if Cardinal solicitates anything as far as mortgage insurance is concerned. And I never had anybody come back and tell me that Cardinal does. But I do know from my own, home buying, that I receive emails stating that I should get mortgage insurance. And, I've consistently, looked at it, and I thought about it. But then I think of, okay, so I already have a policy here that if something happens to me or something happens to my husband, it's going to be covered. The rest of the house will be paid off. There'll be, funeral expenses paid. Looking at it that way. But I'll be honest with you, I never thought about that extra layer of protection just for the mortgage.
And the thing is, Barb, is that, again, so, you can't be overinsured. So, if you have a life insurance policy, and by the way, I do policy reviews as well. So, I can sit down.
All things insurance.
Yes, exactly. So if you're not sure what you have, definitely we can talk about it. And, we can actually, it's kind of like a puzzle. And you want to make sure you have all the pieces to the puzzle, right? And so, most of the time people have things they don't know. They don't know if it's a term. They don't know if it's a whole life. They don't know, when it expires, because term policies expire.
Yes.
And a lot of you
usually
out there,
like around 70 or 75, something depending on when you got them.
They
They will expire.
Exactly. And sometimes even, depend on when you get them, they can even expire, long before that. And just depending. But the key is you want to know what you have, And so you want to sit down with someone like myself who can actually look at what you have and say, okay, this is good. This is a step in the right direction. And if you have insurance, I applaud you, because that means that you already understand the importance, right?
Yes.
Of proactive protection. So that's great. And so what we want to do for you is really just organize those pieces of the puzzle and just make sure that you have all of the right pieces so that you can have maximum protection and peace of mind.
Absolutely.
You know,
and then and I'm gonna say the millennials, because the millennials are out here buying homes now. They're really out here buying
and
homes.
And y'all have money. Y'all
yes.
have money.
Y'all have money.
Y'all
exactly.
have money, and I need to talk to some of you all about what to do with that. Because you can use your insurance policies as investment vehicles. That's a whole nother conversation. People don't even know.
Oh, well, we're going to have you back, because I'm going to be doing something on investments too, but we'll talk about that later. So we'll have you back on that one. But a lot of the millennials, because I'm looking at somebody at my age, and I'm not telling anyone my age. Guess. But I'm looking at someone at my age and how many years I've been in the house, and maybe how many years I have left, depending on how I set up my mortgage, etc. And how many years I have left. So if I got you said earlier, if it's a 15-year policy or 10 years left, you can do a policy like that, because once you paid off your mortgage, you don't need the mortgage insurance, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be someone who, you don't have to get it. That's a good point too. You do not have to get this just like when you just purchased the house. So for someone like yourself who I suggest that you get it when you first purchase the house. But what I'm saying is, if you're a seasoned homeowner, then this is relevant to you too, especially if you have a mortgage. So don't feel like, I only got 5, 10, 15 years to pay. I don't need that. Yeah, you do, because what happens if, God forbid, again, if something happens in that time period, you still want that balance covered as well. And one of the things that I wanted to definitely drive home is, you talked about, how you had other policies and you never necessarily thought about the mortgage protection piece. Well, the mortgage protection piece, again, because in many cases they're term policies, right? They're so affordable that it just makes sense for you to add that component in there. That way you have peace of mind. If something happens, the mortgage is covered. You might have a little bit left over. And if you have any additional policies, then those are just additional policies.
Additional policies that you have.
You know what I mean? That's just additional inheritance, which is something, unfortunately,
that we don't talk about, and we don't legacy, inheritance, none of that.
Because we just have not had that opportunity, up until probably our generation. our parents and, they were just trying to make it, but we're now doing so much better.
Yes.
That it's time to have those
absolutely.
conversations.
Absolutely.
These are conversations that other groups have been privy to for years.
Wow.
And I'm so glad. I am just so glad that, that I have knowledge that I can give to my people.
Yes.
So that we now can, stabilize that playing field.
And be comfortable in what we're doing and knowing that what we're doing, we're setting ourselves up correctly.
Yes.
Because, last night, VMP, had their event when they do their magazine every month. So they have a big event, talking about their magazine. And, it's just so beneficial when you're in the community and you're doing things for the community and things that we just don't know or don't talk about.
Yes.
So, we talked about, business, and the whole theme was manhood, though, but they had the business component and structure in it. And, life insurance should be one of them, and setting up your family, even though
asset protection, period. Just asset protection, right?
Asset protection. I really like that. And so that's a conversation that really needs to be had. And if the male is the head of the family structure, that is a conversation that needs to be held with the head of the household, be it female or be it male, and have that protection set up to protect if anything happens. My brother always says to me, my brother is very literal, right? And he's matter of fact, and he's retired now, but he had an entity of an insurance company, and he always says to me, "Well, Barbara, the life expectancy of a man is 70, and the life expectancy of a woman is 75. So anybody that lives past that,
I think they're going up now. I don't know what COVID
they're doing good.
Yeah,
they're doing good. So Barbara, so when I talk to things, so I just had to say that. But yes, this life expectancy is going up now. I believe that might be something he used to preach way back in the day. I'm not going to give his age either, but he's retired now.
Right.
But when he says stuff like that, I just have to chuckle because you think of, oh my goodness, I'm getting close to 70. What type of protection do I have for my family?
Right.
Do I have that protection?
Right.
For my family. And I mean, whether you're 50, 60, 70, 30, 40.
Right.
If you have a family, or if you're a homeowner, there should be a beneficiary, because what happens if you don't have nobody to take over your home and you pass and it's just you on that mortgage?
Right.
Who do you want to leave it to? Do you want to leave it to anybody?
You might have equity in the property. I mean, I'll use myself. I was a late bloomer. I didn't get married till I was 42 years old. So I had assets, I bought my first house at 25.
Yes.
So I had assets, and for the longest time, I didn't have a husband, but I had things. And so, I had my brother in many cases as my beneficiary. But I wanted to make sure that if something were to happen to me, that he would get those things that I worked so hard for.
And not just let government or the mortgage company or... Yes.
I wanted to, at that time, he was still, building. And I wanted to make sure that if something happened to me, that he would be okay, to secure, pass my legacy on and maybe help him, to make his journey just a little bit easier.
Absolutely. So that's a good idea for those, that are single now and they have assets. That's a way to protect them, to pass it on to your other family members instead of wondering, like, how am I going to get this to them?
Yes.
How will they get this?
Yes.
Well, you'll already have it set up in covering your assets.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, Marcy. I'm just loving this. So, when we were talking about a little bit earlier, so if somebody is disabled, and I don't know, the disability, is it something like if they lose a limb, or is it just disability? Could it be sickness disability, or what type of disability?
Yeah, so there are a number. Again, I'm speaking kind of general because there are a lot of different factors that play into it, and they're different with different carriers.
Okay.
But there are, and I represent many reputable carriers that you've heard of. So. It just depends on the need, but there are definitely ways that you can get coverage for like critical illness riders. That's basically like if you have more of a cancer diagnosis.
Okay.
And you're allowed to take out like a lump sum within your cash value of your policy.
Okay.
So again, if you're, just say you're diagnosed and you're only given 6 months or a year to live or whatever, you have extra money. And I know people who've actually done that. I've had clients do that, where they've actually taken out their money while they're alive and have been able to do things and making sure that they secure that they pay off their house or pay off bills or whatever the case may be. Or maybe they want to take a trip or pay some medical bills, whatever the case may be. But these are things, again, that we don't talk about. And again, when I say covering your assets and asset protection, there's so many. It gets so deep. But the bottom line is that you want to just basically, you want to have a policy that protects you on so many different levels.
That's
so we can
awesome.
go like surface if you just want to just pay off the house, or we can even talking about, again, using your investments as cash. A cash deferred vehicle, cash protect. There's so many different
That's
tax
awesome.
shelters and so many
That's
different
awesome.
things that come with life insurance policies that people don't talk about.
That's awesome. I mean, this is a great show. I love it. And we're going to come back and we're going to close up a little bit, but we got some more questions to ask Marcy. So please stay tuned. Don't go nowhere, because I know you're enjoying this, because I know I am. You saw me sit up like 3 times. We'll be right back.
It is key that you mind your mental health.
Hey guys, how's everyone doing this week?
Hi.
Use the 5 keys to mental
Well, this week
movement.
has been a really monumental week for me. I realized that I was not being myself.
Reaching out.
Be positive attitude person self, like you guys know me to be. I was
Staying
listening to
upbeat.
teaching and get back to that happy, cheery self you guys of me.
This week's been kind of
Being
stressful,
creative.
all of the workload that we have on online learning. So I've been trying to use different platforms and different websites to help ease my mind and ease my stress.
And what about you, Margaret?
Well, you guys know me. I just love to work with others and serve them.
Serving others.
Realize that when I serve others, my mind is off of myself.
That's right. And don't forget, self-care is key.
Self-care.
All right. So see you guys next week.
Right.
Bye.
Your mind matters.
And welcome back again to Mortgage Financing and Homebuyer Ready. We're sitting here, we're having a wonderful conversation today, me and Marcy. This is Marcy Miles Clark, and she is a mortgage protection insurance specialist. Mortgage
Yes.
protection. I'm going to get that right. I'm going to get that
Okay.
right. But the key word is mortgage protection and specialist. So we're going to talk a little bit more with Marcy here, because I'd like to know, what other type of things do you recommend to our audience here? What other type of insurances do you recommend?
Yes, so I'm actually a licensed life and health insurance consultant, so I can do life and health. And the reason why I'm pointing that out is because, yes, I am a mortgage protection specialist, but I also I specialize in final expense insurance as well as long-term care benefits.
Okay.
And again, they're all just, really near and dear to my heart, because like we've been talking about, they all represent different pieces of that puzzle that actually come together to make sure that you're fully protected. And so final expense is what we usually refer to as like burial insurance. So those are usually like their whole life policies, and they're typically like $30,000 or less in terms of the face amount or the death benefit, and they're typically fairly easy to obtain.
Okay.
So you don't need like any type of medical exam or anything like that. You can get approved.
And you
for
offer
them.
that too?
Yes.
Okay.
You
okay.
can get
I
approved.
see it on TV, but
Yes, exactly.
Right,
Right,
okay.
right. So similar to the ones that you see on TV, but I'm a real person.
Right.
If you have a problem, a question,
I like that.
she's
She's a real person. I
Yes.
like that, Marcy.
Yes, like you can connect directly with me. You have an agent. If you have a problem, question, you can call me.
There you go.
Know, opposed to having somebody that you talk to that you don't know and you're just one and done. So I'm in it for the long haul.
There you go. Wonderful.
Yes. So I do the final expense insurance, and that's something that's just very necessary. Again, just another piece of the puzzle, because you want to make sure that if something happens, that at minimal that your family is able to bury you, right? Without having to go and, doing a GoFundMe or passing the plate, And again, these policies are easy to obtain. They're affordable. There's really no reason at this point, not to get them, and they're also guaranteed issues. So anybody can get a policy, regardless of their age. For the most part, they go up to like 85 or so. So, but regardless of their health status, you can get these policies. And they're really easy to obtain. So you want to make sure you get those. And again, somebody might say, "Well, I already have insurance." I hear that a lot. I already have insurance. They got their big life insurance policy. That's great, right? But leave that where it is.
Right.
Let your family have that as their inheritance, right?
Yes.
And then you have a burial policy that pays out quickly. This is really key.
Yes.
Really key, because what people don't understand with regular whole life insurance term policies, sometimes they can be contested. Different things happen.
Yes,
And
that's
they
right.
can take weeks, sometimes months to pay out. What happens?
Yes.
Meantime, you have to bury somebody. And the average funeral nowadays, unfortunately, I just paid for one, $10,000 to $20,000 easily.
Yes.
And so you have your burial policy, your final expense policy in place. That way you'll get that check within 24, 48 hours. It comes, pretty quickly. No real questions asked, right? And then you get that person buried, and then, you'll have the rest of that money you leave as a part of your inheritance, opposed to,
Awesome.
Having to rely on that policy and when it may come, and then also taking a chunk out of that policy to bury you. I always say kind of jokingly, like, you want to have your burial expense separately, because you don't want your beneficiary to have to take money out of their inheritance to bury you, because you might not get that great of
might
not get that great of a funeral if they got to take their money out
And you
of
don't want to be running
it.
around figuring out how you're going to bury the person.
Yeah, that's really the main thing, Barb.
You know, in our communities, that's one of the things that we struggle with. We really struggle with.
Yeah.
You don't think about if something happens earlier than expected, and you figure you still have time.
Right.
Because some things people don't even know about, and I tell people too, even with your job.
Right.
They have insurance.
Right.
And I even tell people, like credit unions.
Right.
They have little policies that you can get.
Right.
Just get a whole bunch of them. Just get them. It's not costing you a lot.
Right. Right.
And it's something that you will have in case the unexpected happens.
That's right. It's about being prepared.
It's about
That's
being prepared, and a lot of little things that people don't know.
Right.
And you telling the final expense, it's not expensive.
Right.
Come on, guys,
Easy to
get your
get.
final expense policy.
Yes.
At the minimum.
Yes. Do not leave your family hanging.
Yes.
There are too many GoFundMes out there.
Yes.
And there are a million people, unfortunately, who have lost their lives over the last 2 years who expected to be here. And unfortunately, many of them were not insured. Yeah.
That is so hard.
Yes.
Just to hear that, it's terrible.
I actually read an article recently, believe it or not. I read an article, and it was just talking about insurances. It was kind of like actuarial science and different things that they come up with different formulas to be able to determine rates and different things.
Right.
And the insurance companies have been very profitable despite that many people dying. And you know why? Because a large percentage of the people who died did not have insurance.
Did not have insurance.
Can you believe that? Can you believe? So rates and everything have just been, stable in the insurance industry.
Yes.
They haven't really had any major increases, but they've been profitable.
Yes.
Although 1 million people have died, and that's because
they didn't have insurance.
for the majority of people who
That
died
person
were
did not have-
uninsured.
So they had no payouts.
Nope.
But people were still paying
They're
premiums.
paying their premiums.
Paying the premiums.
Yes.
But no payouts.
No payouts, And one thing with the final expense, I'm just going to say, is that it's not an if, it's a when. We're all going to cross over at some point, and we want to make sure that when that time comes, that we don't leave that burden on our families. It's not our family's responsibility to bury us.
Yes.
It really so you
isn't.
don't want to leave that burden on
it
your
really
children
isn't.
and your spouse. You got to handle that yourself.
And you have to have the hard conversations.
You do. You really
and if
do.
you need to pull in a professional like yourself,
Yes.
that's what you do.
Yeah.
And you sit down and you have those hard conversations, because
Yes.
every family is not going to have a Marcy. Every family's not going to have a Barbara.
Yep.
So if you don't have a Marcy and a Barbara that
Right.
can sit down and
Then
give
get
you
one.
some tidbit, right?
They need to get
Get
one.
one. I know
Right.
Marcy's talking about the mortgage protection insurance and other insurances,
Right.
but I know something, like what I said about the credit unions and with your job, and you can
Yeah.
have those insurances
Right.
that a lot of people don't realize,
Right.
And they
there
don't
are different
know.
ways, right, to be
So-
able to get them.
So
Absolutely.
I'm adding something else into my spiel. Okay,
Yep.
I have somebody.
Yep.
You need mortgage protection insurance.
Yep. And that actually leads me to my last point. I don't know how we are for time.
Go, give your point.
But I'm also a long-term care specialist, so I
Oh, my
focus on
goodness.
long-term care, yes, benefits, and that is something again. So people say, well, what is long-term care? Well, I'm gonna give it to you short. So we talked about the life insurances. Life insurances obviously pay out the beneficiary in event of a death, but long-term care insurance is a type of health insurance, and that actually will give you money to be able to help you in event of some type of an illness or an accident. So I'll use myself again as an example. My husband was out of work for 6 months because he got ill from from COVID. We didn't see this coming. He was perfectly healthy leading up to that point. After being on a ventilator for 30 days and in the hospital for almost 2 months, he had to totally rehab. When he came out the hospital, which was actually publicly televised, for those of you who saw it, he was wheeled out of the hospital because he could not walk. This is a perfectly healthy, previously athletic
Yes.
person who had to start all over again with the basics, with learning to, swallow, eat. Just you don't even think about the atrophy and the things that set in when you're in a medically induced coma, and then you come back. The moral of the story is when he came out of his coma and they started talking to him about coming home and the steps that he'd have to take to get to that point in rehab and stuff, he started thinking, I'm going to need some help because we're empty nesters. It's just my wife at home, right? Not that the family wouldn't help, because they offered. But again, given the scenario, there were no vaccines or anything. We couldn't let anybody in the house because he was so vulnerable. So my husband, who fought me tooth and nail to not get a long-term care policy a few years prior, but his wife, who knows better, who's a life and health insurance consultant, made him get that policy.
Wow.
Thank God. When he came to and they started talking to him about his recuperation in the process, the first thing he says to me is, what about that long-term care policy? I said, what about that long-term care policy? The one you didn't want? So
You didn't throw that at him then,
I
Marcy,
did.
you?
Yeah, I did.
Dang.
But, it was all in fun and games.
I know,
but
of course.
But that's the whole thing of insurance. He didn't want that. I don't want that. It's expensive. And sometimes it can be. He had a standalone policy that he actually got through his job. So, but there are different ways that you can get them. You can get them independently through someone like myself. You can get them, as a rider, as part of like a long-term, of a whole life policy or term policy like we talked about earlier. There are a lot of different ways that you can get those benefits, but the bottom line is that you want to talk to someone because you want to make sure,
Make
again,
sure that you cover
if you
it.
have a life-changing event, not, there's life, there's death, and then there's the in-between.
Right.
You're in an accident or,
Right.
something happens
Right.
to you, you become incapacitated and you need help. You either need to go to a rehab, you need to be in a nursing home. Who's going to pay for that?
Yeah. Oh my
You
God!
know?
I didn't know the long-term care, because so many people, for long-term, they want to take your pension, they want to take your Social Security,
yeah.
they want to take all of that from you in order for the,
For
for
you
the
to
long
get
term.
that.
Yeah. Yes.
And the thing is, Barb, is that when we think about it, when we talk about long-term care, and I'll tell you, again, when my husband and I, when we decided to get that policy, we were thinking about using it 20, 30 years down the line when we get old.
You don't think
You know what I
about
mean? So we
that,
can have
yeah.
somebody come into our house and,
Yeah.
be able to take care of us. We didn't. Who knew
Right.
that there was a pandemic looming that was going to come and do this to us?
Wow.
Who knew?
This is just amazing. This has been so wonderful today. Just because I'm learning some stuff, and so I'm going to ask you this last question.
Yeah.
Even if you're somebody like me that has like little different, because I got little stuff all over the place, right? So, and I know I need to put it in one place for my husband, right?
Pull it
but
together.
but even with me to say like, I got something here, I got something here, if I was to call on you and you would sit down with me and I show you what I have, and then you recommend what else I need.
Right, exactly.
You would do that for us.
That's exactly what we'll do. Yep. And then we also want to make sure too that what you have, that we get that in a nice safe deposit box.
Yeah, that would be good.
Or some type of safekeeping.
That would be good.
You know,
yeah, instead of just a folder somewhere in my house saying I have this and I have that.
Yeah, we'll make sure it's in a safe place and that your beneficiaries know where it is as well.
Your beneficiaries.
That's really important because it's really important. I'm gonna tell you, it's one thing to have the stuff you need,
but it's another thing to know exactly. Like I know exactly where everything is, right?
A bit of a good, right?
You know, it doesn't do. But well, I do know. You know, my son, he knows my passcode and stuff to everything. So, but but you're absolutely right. And it's a family conversation, everybody. It's a family conversation that needs to be had. And you just really need to get your stuff in order.
Yes.
This has been wonderful. We're winding down, and this conversation has just been wonderful. And Marcy, I am so appreciative, and I am so thankful of the information that you have shared with us. Can you go ahead and tell the people how they could get in contact with you?
Yes, you can call me directly at 410-540-4940. That's 410-540-4940. You can also go on our lovely website, which I have posted here. It's www.coveryoursatsinsurance.com. That's coveryoursatsinsurance.com.
And also, we're going to make sure that this is tagged on this video today. So even if you want to go back and you want to share it, you want other people to look at this, all of Marcy's information is going to be there. And that's what we try to do. Every time we have a guest, we make sure that their information stays put on our link so that you can go back and view it. And we're hoping that you're sharing to the masses, especially, you know, information that you deem that is just so important that really needs to get out. And I just think that the information that we've had today, well, just insurance period, that we've been talking about over the past couple of weeks, and we have one more episode of insurance coming up for you too, which is, you're going to love that as well. But this information is so valuable, and today the information I got from Marcy, this is very close to my heart because it helps you help your family.
Yes, that's what it's about.
You know, and it's not just about if you purchase a home. You heard her say everything insurance. She does everything insurance, not just if you purchase a home, but if you purchase a home, that is one of the biggest assets that you're ever going to have. Is home buying. That's why Jackie and I were doing this. We want everybody to know about this process. So I just want to say thank you to Marcy again for being here. You've been awesome. I want to say thank you to you for being here with us today. And we just love you, and we love doing this for you. And we always just want you to know what your power is and understanding your power to purchase, and now your power for insurance. So we'll see you here again in 2. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next time. See you in 2. Thank you for coming.
God bless.